You are listening to WXRWLP Milwaukee on 104.1 FM and on riverwestradio.com everywhere. Now you can also listen by telling your smart speaker to play Riverwest Radio. Support for this program comes from Collectivo Coffee and Troubadour Bakery, makers of artisan breads and scratch-baked goodies. Visitors to Collectivo's Bayview Cafe can look in on Troubadour Bakers as they prepare breads and cafe favorites daily. More info is at collectivocoffee.com. Welcome to Cinema Fireside. Thank you for listening in. Always really appreciate it. I hope everybody is doing well. If you're listening live, it's a beautiful evening in Milwaukee. The sun is out. It's not hot. The temperature is moderate. Gabe, thanks for calling in, man. I really appreciate it. So, yeah, it's a trip. All of a sudden you're in front of the microphone and you got to talk. It's really dreamlike. It's all of a sudden it's there, man. Gabe was here live last Monday. That was a total trip, seeing him out on the sidewalk, unexpected. Therefore defined out of the blue. So, yeah, just saw his happy face there, live out of Kansas City into Milwaukee. There our man was. He was up here on stage. So, Gabe, what a surprise appearance. Now, Gabe's back in phone land, calling in from... Tom Pankowski informs us today is Sidney Lumet's birthday. Excellent. He has a great book, yes, we can use the word great, called Making Movies. And... about one of 70 or 80 books I'm reading right now, so I got to find that. It's lurking around the crib somewhere. Sidney Lumet, Making Movies. He, let's see, I was going to say he made Tootsie, but that would be Sidney Pollack. Sidney Pollack plays pool with Tom Cruise in Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. Pollack was a film director, and he would do acting stints as well. And so he is the doctor at the beginning of Eyes Wide Shut when one of the chicks ODs, and playing pool, discussing with Mr. Cruise circumstances. And I remember seeing Eyes Wide Shut at the theater back in '99, going way out into the western dreamlands of Milwaukee. I mean, like 20 miles away. Out in kissing the border of Waukesha, there were two theaters, West Town and West Point. And then they both disappeared for some sort of ultra-screen theater, which then in itself disappeared into this palace out there. I think it's called the Majestic now. So yeah, that was quite a succession of theaters and ideas through the decades, and one seated to the next, so that was kind of wild. So we saw Eyes Wide Shut way out in, I think it was West Point or West Town, one of those two. And I've always enjoyed Eyes Wide Shut because there's nothing that will diminish when you watch it, because there's films that you might get a very large emotional charge out of initially, and it's based on emotion, and it's based on initial curiosity, and it's based on your initial experience with it. And then as you see it again, that emotionality begins to wear thin, and you're kind of left with its in the practical domain of the film. And then it's like, oh, well, I guess it wasn't as good as I thought it was, or it's certainly not the same experience as when I first saw it. But with Eyes Wide Shut, there's no danger in it, because it's just a visual feast, and it's these unknown qualities that you kind of have to essentially figure out what's going on. Like when they're playing pool, I don't know, someone had mentioned, I didn't know what was going on, but it sure looked good. And that's good enough. That really is good enough. It's just a sumptuous feast of cinematic flair provided by Mr. Kubrick, who has made 13 films from Fear and Desire from, I believe, 1953, concluding in 1999 with Eyes Wide Shut. And to repeat, there is a great book called Eyes Wide Open, and I think it's by Frederick Raffleson, and it chronicles him and Kubrick writing Eyes Wide Shut, faxing back and forth. It's a very cool book. If you're into Stanley Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut on the writing of Eyes Wide, or it's Eyes Wide Open on the writing of Eyes Wide Shut. And then also they have a book where it's the screenplay of Eyes Wide Shut and a dream novella, which it is based on by the author's Arthur Schnitzler. It's from around like 24 or so, and it's a pretty. The novel is and the film are quite similar, and so the novel is from the mid-20s. If you're into Eyes Wide Shut, yeah, it's great to read the screenplay. Great to read Arthur Schnitzler's novel of it. So yeah, that's and actually there's this dude out in Cedarburg who is a Kubrick scholar. I mean, a for real one. I'm not talking about someone who claims to be this, that, or something like that, but I mean, he's actually a Kubrick scholar, and he wrote a book, and I see him once a year for this golf invitational, and so I got to get on that book and read that. I'm very blessed that he passed it on to me. So I do get various. I have to operate with discretion because time is valuable, but I do read books of people that I have a closer affinity to than Joe Blow attempting to hand me a book out on the street, which just is not going to work. Same with films. I can't watch other people's films. I just don't have the inclination for it. So I just tell people, since I do the same thing as a business, I can't, look at your work, and the same for scripts and so on and so forth. So that gets me out of all of that, because if I want to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to have it imposed on me. Same with your time. Someone goes, hey, what are you doing today? Well, I'm very, very busy. What are you doing tomorrow? I'm very busy. What are you doing this weekend? I'm very, very busy. What are you doing 10 years from now? Oh, I'm going to be very, very busy. So, yeah, it's your time. I wouldn't, it's not up for rent. It's not up for sale. That's not going to work. You got to find some dude on the couch. Yeah, that buzz. Sorry about that. I've got a light here that I pressed, and see, that's what happens when you press anything red. You see what happens. That's why they say don't press the red button, man. So now it'll stay red. Martin, you'll see it at the end of the show, and it's just some pre-fade or something that's on. So that's the story behind that. So it's summer. That means 70s road films. So now I'm at the second tier. The first tier is Race to the Devil, Two Lane Blacktop, Vanishing Point, Sugarland Express, Duel, all the ones we keep talking about. So now we're at the second tier, Gone in 60 Seconds, Stingray, Grand Theft Auto. So these films, they're not good, they're not bad. They're kind of like in that holding pattern of, obviously the medium. So, watching these films, it's like, oh man, they start to all look the same. It's like there's no distinguishing qualities. What's interesting, of the three I mentioned, Ron Howard directed he directed Grand Theft Auto. He and this chick go off to get married. She's engaged to some rich dude, and the rich dude's parents do not, because the father's into politics, this marriage to a peasant cannot take place. So, but the young couple flee to Vegas to get married, and a grand car chase ensues, and it's very campy, the dialogue, the situations, and so on and so forth. I mean, to a degree. So then when you go to Gone in 60 Seconds, which is kind of weird because it's kind of like this realistic portrayal of people with a lot of kind of like uncertain acting among it, or amid it, and so it's kind of uncanny. It's like this mix of reality and kind of bad acting, but that admixture has its charm. And I was kind of tired of watching. Well, I'm tired of almost watching every film, watching Gone in 60 Seconds, and I'm fighting to stay awake. And I'm opening my eyes, and it's like these wide streets in Los Angeles, and all of these police and cars and this, and I'm thinking this chase has been going on now for like about an hour. I don't know if there was a story going on or what, but it just seemed kind of endless. Very you're half sleeping. The whole thing becomes really existential in the experience. So I may ultimately give Gone in 60 Seconds a second look. We're going to get to you, Gabe. We haven't forgotten you. Stingray. A lot of these films take place in the South. Now, the two that I mentioned, Gone in 60 Seconds and Grand Theft, take place in California, but a lot of them take place in the South. So when we were watching Stingray from '78, I was like, man, this is like in the South or something like that. And then I caught a thing that said Illinois, and I said, well, that's Southern Illinois, because Southern Illinois, their accents actually change. It's starting to get into the South. Then I saw the East St. Louis Cops, so that put us in East St. Louis, which is in southwest Illinois right there. So, yeah, that's what's great about those films as well is you actually see the culture, you see the small towns, you see the settings of that era. You see the cars, those badass 70's cars, and a lot of Dodge Chargers in these films. There was a Dodge, at least out of 2 to 3, there was a Dodge Charger, and that Dodge Charger is also what's happening in Bullet, Phantasms, the Barracuda. We also went to see Heredity at the theater. The Oriental's closing. Milwaukee Film is taking over. God bless you, Eric Levin. Thank you so much for all that you've done, Eric. Eric was kind enough to show a film of mine back in '97, and Bill Behrens projected it. Eric Levin, thank you so much for all that you've done for the Oriental City, all that you've done for the city of Milwaukee. You are a cinematic icon in Milwaukee, so thank you, Eric Levin, and your spirit is strong. It's always going to live on, my man. We're very fortunate to have you, so thank you. So we were watching Hereditary, or I don't even care, at the theater at the Oriental, and we're all of a sudden there's a particular scene I couldn't even hear the dialogue anymore. It just my colleague said they couldn't hear the dialogue either. But you have to re-question that circumstance. But the bottom line is that film that's out directly pays homage to one of my films. There's no uncertainty whatsoever. All of a sudden, there it is, and I'm like tripping. And it's a great honor to have a major, popular horror film out there in the zeitgeist pay homage to one of your works. And there you're sitting in the theater watching it, and there it is. So that is a trip and a half, to say the least. So this morning I finished Taming of the Shrew, Shakespeare, because of Stone Soup Shakespeare. I had it in Shorewood a few weeks ago, and I know there's another production in Milwaukee coming up, I think, at the Performing Arts Center from a different group. So whatever they're going to put on this year, I will tackle that play as well. And my colleague got me a great book on 70's B films. It's something to do with drive-ins, something to do with playing on Wednesdays. It's a convoluted title, so I can't think of it at the moment. But thank you so much for that book. And I am now going to restart it with a notebook at hand. Monday night is Space Music Night on another station here in Milwaukee. So instead of radio dramas, probably thinking very strongly about life and work while listening to space music tonight. So that's enough. I think it's enough. No. Reading started from the beginning because I didn't know where my bookmark was, where it went. Rachel Cusk's Outline. And when I was up at Green Lake, our man, Carl Bogner, is reading Rachel Cusk's Outline. I said, dude, I read Transit. Now I'm reading Outline. and the trilogy finishes with kudos, and that is the style to be reading is Rachel Cusk, man. So that definitely rocks. There's nothing in the very early morning, the ethereal realm, reading Rachel Cusk Outline in Transit, man. That is for real. And reading David Thompson's Orson Welles bio, my colleague got that. And just he's very assumptive. That's one of his qualities. He makes these very broad assumptions and forms his own theoretical narratives about things. But it's great, really, to be into the world of Orson Welles' upbringing, formative years, and on to all of his great work. He was just doing it all the time, and he was extremely prodigious, extremely accomplished, and extremely innovative. Gabe, you have been waiting at the gate. You've been sweating at the gate. And that gate, we're unlocking the gate right now. We're going through the key ring. Keys are jangling, cursing and muttering. No, not on this end, man. We got mega patience. My man, how you doing?
Mark, great opening, great intro here, great stuff. Excellent.
It was an attempt.
Love the enthusiasm, man. Covered. You just covered it all. Awesome stuff, man. You know, sometimes like during your opening monologue, I feel like I'm doing what sometimes I feel like you're doing during the show. Like I just wrote 2 pages of notes on a yellow legal pad of just stuff covering a whole range of ideas, half-finished thoughts, half-finished ideas, half-finished sketches that I was thinking of, things I was thinking to talk about on the show, half thought up ideas of things that you mentioned, that I think, well, man, maybe I should think, add to that, and then, you cover 13 more things, so by that point, the third note is like, oh, well, that's ancient history at this point. But man, you just cover the bases, and I'm just sketching. It clears my mind. It eases my soul. And, man, I'm looking at this legal pad just covered with extensive full notes. So, man, cool stuff, Mark. I almost feel like you just, like we just had a whole show right there. So that is just super cool. Great to be back in Kansas City. Yeah, but, man, do I miss Milwaukee. Oh, my goodness. It was, you just pack as much as you can into a trip. And you can't see everyone, you can't do everything, but, man, you certainly try. So cool stuff there.
It's good seeing you, my man.
Oh, it was great seeing you, Mark, as always. I mean, just, there's no substitute. Mark, I'm so happy that I didn't want to mention in Hereditary because I wasn't sure if there were, what the exact references to other films are. There's obviously Rosemary's Baby. There's obviously handfuls of like Ride with the Devil, Rosemary's Baby, a handful of other cult and exploitation, horror, underground, drive-in, grindhouse cinema films. And I wasn't sure if there was in fact a reference to your work in there. So I was like, I didn't bring it up, and I'm glad to hear that you did in fact go see this movie. Hereditary is a film that I have this sort of uncomfortable love for because I don't think it's necessarily a great film. I think it's a great film-going experience, though. I think it just has all these qualities that make a movie just a movie. And some of them work really well in terms of my going experience. I just was like, man, there was some stuff where I was just like, this is movie. This is movie time right here. And there's all this other stuff that's like just extremely elaborate or, like pretentious or just precise and just trying to go for all these metaphors upon metaphors with all this iconography and all these archetypes and all this visual symbolism and symbology. And a lot of that stuff just didn't work for me. Some of it did, and some of it didn't. Like this very Philip Rothian portrait of the fallacy of the American dream or the American way and all these other microcosms within it. Some of it's really cool. Some of it I thought just was like, okay, let's just get to the next scene here. But you're dealing with a mature film about, even though some of the characters are teenagers, you're dealing with a mature, thoughtful film made by adults about mostly adults for adults. Not everything is spelled out. Not everything is like told to you, like, in loud dialogue. Some of it is, but I love the fact that the film mostly uncovers a lot of stuff visually. It harkens back to an older era of filmmaking, and at the very least, that is just that alone. It gains and gathers and holds my attention more than just another piece of just average. And the thing is that for every 30 horror films that come out, there's one Hereditary. So to the discerning filmgoer that goes to see Hereditary, they're like, oh, what's this? Who cares? If you have this higher standard of film going, which is great if you do, Hereditary might not stand out as high. But to the average filmgoer that goes to see a lot of films where they're just like, you see some average stuff, you see films that are highly acclaimed and they're not quite as good as you were hoping, and you see some stuff that, gets average reviews or, doesn't really stand out in the critical periphery, and actually has all these wonderful, strange, beguiling, and interesting attributes. But I think Hereditary is made by a passionate cinema goer, by a passionate cinephile who is relaying her hopes, dreams, and just some of her obsessions on screen, some of her predilections with just these objects and these ideas and these obsessions and these visual games that sometimes cinema can play on the viewer. So I just think it's an interesting film. I don't think it's a great, great, great film, but I think that there's all this great stuff in it. So at the very least, I've been recommending that there's a handful of people that I know who don't go see movies very often, and just for the visual, not necessarily, I don't think it's a very well-written film at times. I think aspects of it, like there's aspects of the screenplay that I think go from point A to point B to point C, and I'm like, well, I guess that follows, a certain form of logic, even though most of the film is so stupid and so hard-headedly illogical and just dumb. But it's a horror film, and it's a film modeled after grindhouse horror films. So logic, order, reason, following the chain of events isn't necessarily necessary in movies like that. But there's a discourse, there's a kind of a dissonance because the film does root itself in this sort of American reality where it's making a statement, where it's being sort of critical of real life. So I think it doesn't quite all add up because it's these two different films, and it never quite gels into one film fully. But I still loved it. I still just think I just had a ton of fun watching it. So super cool stuff there. Big shout out to some of our listeners, who sometimes are avid all the time. Some of them come and go. We have listeners in Sweden, listeners in Norway. We've heard from people in Tokyo, people in LA, people in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York. We got people in South Africa that I haven't heard from them in quite a while, but about a year ago there was a handful. There was like two people from South Africa that gave me shout outs. We got people in Europe, people in, but mostly North America. So that's just super cool. I just want to relay that, you just never know who's tuning in and who's listening, because sometimes just when you least expect it, you just get this shout out or this hello, and you're just like, oh, wow. Like, oh, man, people, someone in Tokyo is down with this. It's just super cool. You just never know. Mark, you're talking about the road film or like the chase film, or this idea of like the cars in the summer and that expression. And I think those summer road films of the 70's, especially like the kind of the bad ones, they work on that primal level. But I was just thinking, I was jotting down some notes as you were talking, and one film that I don't think I've brought up a ton on the show is like Ronin from 1998, which came out 20 years ago now. It's crazy to think of that. But that may be the greatest chase and car and highway sequence I've ever seen in a film. John Frankenheimer's last good film that he ever made, and it's one of his best films that he ever made. It's just a really, really well-made, tense, taut, just good, tightly wound action film. It's got a great performance by Robert De Niro, and just that later, before he became a total Oh, it's just where his career is now, where he'll just do anything, and there's no talent really being exhibited anywhere. But Ronan is just, man, that I don't want to say there's no talent. Actually, that's not true. He's just working on autopilot, and you know what? If it's paying the bills and he loves doing it, kudos to him.
I think the bills have already been paid. I did see Ronan at the theater, I believe, when it came out. So yeah, I remember that as being a solid film. So I would agree with you, my friend.
Yeah, and there's two really exceptional chase sequences in that film, but the one that's like 2/3 of the way in, and maybe even 3/4, is just so well done. Like and it's not over edited, it's not overshot. It just has these really crazy stunts and the stunt driving, and it has these car crashes that happen in single shots where it's like the cars are actually crashing. There's not 15 cuts to cover up what's going on or to make it look crazier than it is. It's just fast and intense, and it's just actually, not using CGI. It's physical effects. And going back to that action film, that's just one of the better genre action films ever made. Jason Bourne, actually, from 2 years ago, has a great, far too CGI assisted, but still great chase sequence in Las Vegas near the end of that film. It's otherwise a not very great action film. I've often acclaimed the Jason Bourne films on this show, the second and the third one, for what they are. They're PG-13 films put out by Universal Pictures in 2004 and 2007, respectively. They're well edited, they're well made, they're well shot. They've got great sound design. That's the highlight of those films, is the sound. And there is a certain sort of brevity to it. Those are well-made action films. But the relaunch of the series Jason Bourne from 2 years ago, which is just so silly and so bad at times, it just I can't even believe what I was watching when I saw it. But there's these sequences that are just like, okay, this is what I came for. But at the same time, it wasn't enough to save that movie as a whole.
You know, I've yet to see that trilogy, and so
Yep.
it gets lost because, I haven't, all of a sudden something like Private Property from '60 with Warren Oates comes up, which I have to see. So, I mean, you know what I'm saying? It would just keep getting pushed back, and there's a few hundred films that I really have to check out. So, I mean, yeah, man, oh man, oh man.
I would say if it came down to seeing You Were Never Really Here or watching the 3 Bourne films, like, it's no question, watch You Were Never Really Here. Watch the new Lynn Ramsey film. Watch something that's artfully made. That's, at the very least, if you don't like it, you're not liking something that's interesting and original and arresting and made for a more discerning audience than something that's made for mass consumption. I can't say I can even pinpoint your taste even now, Mark, because you're your own person. You're an individual. You're unique, and you're unpredictable. So I can't say, oh, you're going to love it. You're for sure going to love it, or oh, you're going to hate that. You're for sure going to hate that. You find things, you find interesting things in movies that I would think that you wouldn't find anything in, and then it's films that I recommended to you where you're like, oh, this is a Mark film all the way. You've been like, yeah, there's just nothing there for me. So, I never know what to throw your way, but
yeah,
when there's something interesting that I think is like, wow, this is like, there's something just cinema here, I always text you.
Yeah, thanks, Gabe. Full disclosure, I take all advice and throw it down the toilet.
Which you should. That's
right.
Good. You're living
and
your
no
own
offense
life.
to anyone, but that's the way it is. You know what? I anything that somebody sends me, this, that, or that, you're literally wasting your time, man. I'd be eating a cheeseburger instead with that half hour.
Sure. Well, I think there's a handful of movies that people have recommended my way that it turns out I really liked them, and I'm glad that they took the time to think of me. And other times, yeah, it's just like, well, okay, maybe I'll get around to that. I'm glad that the new Jurassic Park movie really entertained you, but I will probably skip that. I'll probably watch it through a streaming service at some point in about a year, maybe sooner, but it's not a film that I'm dying to review. It's not a film that I'm dying to see. It's not a film that I need to see, that I want to see. Will I enjoy it? Undoubtedly. Will I find things that I unexpectedly like, maybe even love about it? Of course. These are well-made entertainments for grown-up children. And there was a lot to like about Jurassic World, unexpectedly. I've seen that movie 2 or 3 times now through circumstance. I'm not going to say that I went out of my way to consciously choose to watch that film, but I acquired it on DVD when it came out, and I thoroughly loved the way it was paced, edited, and made, and it's just a Hollywood product. At its most mechanical and precise and predictable best, it's basically a remake of all those Jurassic Park movies. Are a machine of the same outline, the same film, done the same way with just different. It's like if you did a play using marionette dolls of the Jurassic Park movies, it's the same marionette play. If you take away all the special effects and all the money, there's no story there, there's no movie there. There's just the same conflict in the same 3 acts done the exact same way. And somehow there was still something thoroughly entertaining about the 4th Jurassic Park. I'm going to call it Jurassic Park 4. So anyway,
I wish I could go back to 1993. I have yet to see Jurassic Park. Never seen it.
Whoa.
And it's now on my summer list because I don't, get into films like that. But once every 10 years, I'll allow for it. So now. 25 years later, I'm going to allow to. I have set aside 2 hours for that film.
Mark, that's a good decision. Jurassic Park looked through the lens of 25 years later is an interesting film because if you look at what Steven Spielberg was directing in '93, you've got Schindler's List, which is maybe one of the most emotionally affecting films ever made. And the fact that it's made by Steven Spielberg and it's effective and it works and it's still a totally contrived, phony disaster on some levels. The problems that a lot of people and a lot of Jews have. I don't know if that word is offensive to some. I know some people take offense with the Jewish race being called Jews, but I know a lot of Jewish people that had problems with because they felt that Spielberg was making a film about how great Spielberg, and he put all these Spielbergian touches and he just sentimentalized it and made it all, he just missed the point. I know a lot of Jewish people that have problems with the movie Shoah. I know a lot of Jewish people that have problems with any sort of reenactment or profiting from the Holocaust in any way, shape, or form. Or dramatizing it or bringing it, because there's always something that's missing or that's something that goes too far. Whatever. All those are valid arguments, but these are films. These are movies. These are films put out by major studios to make money. At the very least, I think 93 is a really interesting year for Spielberg because he's an artist who's constantly changing and challenging himself and still working on the whims of his 9-year-old self. So there's this interesting, 93 is the year, because you have him making this bold, brilliant, successful and unsuccessful statement about world history and just his entire consciousness with those 2 films. Jurassic Park, which is like the ultimate 9-year-old film, made by a 9-year-old for 9-year-olds. And you also have Schindler's List. So 93, Spielberg, that's where movies are. I mean, that's just the magic of cinema right there. Seeing Jurassic Park in the theater in 1993 is like the film-going, like, cosmopoly. That's just like, I don't know if a film experience has ever topped that. I remember going to the matinee with my mom and my sister, and I didn't know what the movie was. I hadn't seen a trailer. Somehow, I didn't know what Jurassic Park was. I didn't know anything about it, which, considering that I was trying to read every issue of Entertainment Weekly, cover to cover, word for word, somehow all the buzz about Jurassic Park didn't filter in, and I didn't connect it to this movie I was going to see. So I had known that there was all this special effect work being done and being revolutionized, but I didn't know that it was for this movie. So I knew that there were all these physical effects, like all these like large, effects that Industrial Light and Magic was trying to pioneer using robotics, and then realizing that the digital technology of computer graphics had advanced enough to use, digital dinosaurs. And so I go to see this movie, no idea what it's about, no idea what I'm in for, and it's this happy Spielbergian E.T. Everyone's holding hands. There's all this, color. There's the John Williams score. There's dinosaurs. It's just like, whoa, what is going on? And then everyone's smiling. There's all this one, and then it turns into like Jaws times 5. And there's this sequence with the T-Rex that is just the first time you see that in the theater, and you have no idea what you're going for, and you see it with an audience that has no idea what's about to happen. That is still the unparalleled film experience in the theater that I've ever had. I would compare it to what Spielberg talks about seeing Ben-Hur in the theater, like the chariot race sequence when he was 9. There's just nothing like it. And I remember my mom physically hurt my hand because she grabbed it so hard, she squeezed it, and I was like, ow! Like I was screaming because she just was
Wait,
so
is this
scared.
Schindler's List or Jurassic Park?
For Jurassic Park.
Okay,
my mom
gotcha.
did not see Schindler's List until many years. I forced her to watch it for various reasons. But no, we go see Jurassic Park, and she's just like on the edge of her seat, and that this T-Rex sequence, she's just physically hurting me and my
with
sister's
Mark
hand.
Bolan?
Pardon?
No, I said you mean with Mark Bolan. You said T-Rex, so just doing a.
I get you. That's a good pun, Mark. So yeah, that's well worth your time, even if it's not a very great film. Yeah, just big shout-outs to our listeners, Heidi, Jack, Kelvin, Josh, Bjorn, Lou, Dan, Ken, and I know I'm missing a bunch of others, but those are the ones on the top of my head right now. Mark, I finally got around to watching King of Kings, Nicholas Ray's probably least essential film that he ever made. I just thought of it the other week, and I said, I want to watch it. It's one of those films that's just one of those rando films in a rando director's filmography, and I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm watching it. And, it seems like it's a workman's mission, like he was paid to do it, and he did it to the best of his ability. His heart and his passion doesn't seem to be there, but it does a good job. It dramatizes the events of John the Baptist and to Jesus, and then, of course, the crucifixion. And it's visually, it's just got all the things that Nicholas Ray does well: color, scope, intimacy, sentimentality, and of course darkness, layers of moral darkness, and just very strange, very unemotional, but subterranean acting. Just really interesting stuff, even if it's not a very good film. But it's made by Nicholas Ray. What can I say? At the very least, you got that going for it.
Yeah, and our man Patrick McGilligan here in Milwaukee wrote Nicholas Ray's biography, and I'm glad you brought up Nicholas Ray because I gotta get back to that book, my man. So thank you, Gabe. Mm-hmm. And actually, there's a great book on Binghamton University up in upstate New York, covering the experimental period from '67 to '77. Nicholas Ray was a guest as well as he taught there as a guest, and Dennis Hopper also made an appearance at the school. So it's called Binghamton Babylon, and it's a really interesting book on if you're into university experimental filmmaking, that mega rocks. So
yeah, there's a lot of good film. There's just so many good film texts out there that have been written over the years. A lot of great stuff in the 50s, the 60s, 70s, 80s, and there's just so many good film texts that are still coming out every year. There's numerous ones. There's that book about Casablanca. We'll always have Casablanca, which came out last year, which is like the definitive biography of the making of Casablanca. I am like dying to read that, but I've got 30. I've got literally physically like 30. I mean, there's more and there's less depending on the count of how often they get read. But there's just all too many books that I'm in the middle of reading, and you just saying, I'll just buy this, I'll just buy that, and then eventually it just gets out of control. The Japanese actually have a word for book hoarding, and I've gotten to the point recently where I will go to the used bookstore and I will peruse rather than purchase. And I like that. It's the only form close to control that I have over my book purchasing addiction. Because otherwise, it's just like that is the continuation of an addiction. It's reckless. It's just sometimes it's unruly. It's out of control. It's not breaking the bank, because when you're buying used books, at the very least, it's a minor form of hoarding, but it's also it turns into a justified form of hoarding, because there's always this idea of that, no, this is going to get used because I'm going to read this and it's going to be of use to me. And for the most part, yeah, that does usually happen with book hoarders. But I find myself getting, I'll go through these waves of book hoarding where I'll get back into it, and then I kind of clean up shop, and I like, nope, that's it. Nope, we're cleaning things up. We're taking charge, getting back to nope, we're not going down this again. We're not getting into this pattern of terror and anxiety and stress and delusion. And then I'll just go back into it, and I'll tell you, it's like getting back together with an old girlfriend. It's just like, but I'll go into this Prospero's bookstore, and I will sit there for 3 hours on a day off and peruse like 3 new additions to the film area, because just the most random books will appear in there from the 50s and the 60s, like these old film texts, a lot of which, like the Western. There's this book that I'm going through, which is, I think it was written in 1962 or 1963, and it's written in this very dry, very West Coast academic look at this, and it's very romantic. It looks at the Western in the way that people were looking at the Western at that point. So that's before the revisionist period in the 70s and the 80s, and especially the 90s with like Clint Eastwood and postmodernism and the hippie Western and the counterculture. It's still in that studio era of the 50s and the early 60s of where the Western is this very like stoic, very restrained, very almost like Russian theater, where everything is very held back, where everything is implied, but nothing is ever fully just stated. And this very conservative John Ford way of making the Western of restraint and underlying themes rather than overt. So reading the interpretation of the Westerns that came before that, and it looks at the silent Westerns, and most of the films that they reference, they're referencing directors on a last name basis. They're referencing films directly and making cross references. I've never heard of most of these films that they're talking about, so it's just like film nerd texts of how film nerd texts of today reference films from 40 years ago, 20 years ago. This book is doing it with that stuff. So it's just, man, I'll read like 5 pages and I'll just put it down and stare off, and I am just in heaven, thinking about the hands that have physically touched that book, and thinking about the multitudes of copies of that book and the people that read that book, and their thinking, their process, their passion, their enthusiasm, their knowledge of those films at that time over the years, of their expansive film knowledge. And most of the people that read that book are probably dead. And all those films that they watched, all that knowledge they had, all those experiences that they probably kept mostly just to themselves, these sort of lonely Western-loving cinephiles, most of those thoughts and those feelings and those experiences are now gone. And it is just so delicious to read this book and just think about that. And like that.
What book is that, my man?
It's this.
You've got me so hypnotized, I've lost all sense of content, and I'm just at the periphery of context with this. It's one of those large coffee table sized encyclopedic texts from the early 60s when they started to print more serious film texts and film volumes. Yeah.
When people started to look at films more subjectively and more academically, the post Manny Farber sort of era, early 60s, mid 60s, when film studies and film scholarship was starting to be taken seriously for the first time, mostly West Coast. was where it happened a little more evenly. And then, of course, because the New York stuff was like passion, fervor, this just that competitive, almost like bullyingly Hemingway-esque, like, I'm the most important film critic. I know more about movies than you do. My opinion is more informed and more meaningful than yours is. And even though I'm stating it's just an opinion, it means more because it's mine, and I'm going to drink 5 gin and tonics after I'm done writing this just to prove the point to myself. And, that West Coast style of casual enthusiasm, where it's just more nerdy, it's more singular, it's less competitive, it's less angry, it's less, and honestly, it's less personality disordered. And that stuff is just super cool. That passionate, Hollywoody, California-y, Berkeley pressy, cool, like just film lover, die for film stuff. It's just called The Western. And it's got this large print. It's got this big leather-bound, big book. It's like as big as like a Taschen like coffee table book. And it has these sections in it where it goes, like where it'll have frame layouts, where it'll show you editing and cutting and frame and like composition and stuff. But most of it's just very thorough, but not overly academic film description. It talks about the themes in the film, the description of the films, and the crossing themes, like how there are themes that repetitively show up in a director's work or in an actor's filmography or in a certain type of performance, a certain type of film. And it appears to be a very influential text. I've never heard of this book before. Off the top of my head, I can't remember who wrote it, but it's called like The Western, published in 1962. It's got all these black and white layouts, and it makes references mostly to movies like Westerns from the like mid 50s and back. But it talks, the Westerns of Howard Hawks, the Westerns of John Ford, the Westerns of, various other films, William Wellman, and the philosophy underneath those films. Not the films themselves, but these possible underlying themes, which is, where a lot of that comes from. And John Ford, what I love is that it doesn't go too far into John Ford. John Ford, I feel like, is the Kurosawa of American cinema, American art, mainstream cinema. It's just, I just don't agree with it. I don't think that there's as much there as everyone else says. Not to say that those are not great films made by a masterful filmmaker. I just think that there are so many other filmmakers that made other films that are just frankly superior and more entertaining. Anthony Mann, the films that he made, the movies, the Westerns that he made with Jimmy Stewart in the 1950s and into the 1960s, they're probably my favorite Westerns ever made. And they operate as Hollywood fare, but the characters don't all talk the same. Everyone doesn't have this. That's like the problem with mystery literature, or the problem with this sort of angry postmodern literature where all the characters sound the same, all the characters talk the same, all the characters have the same cynical, broken, angry, what's the Dashiell Hammett style of despondency, where everyone has the same tone, afflection, and type of observation. The films of Anthony Mann have characters that are sketched out, and yes, they are like these sort of like the prototypical this type of supporting character, that type of supporting character, but they have their own individual voices. So even though there isn't this cynical underlying nihilistic poetry, I guess if that's what you want to call it, of the John Ford films, I think the films of William Wellman, William Wyler, Howard Hawks, and Anthony Mann, and King Vidor, among many others, I think that there actually is a deeper, more expressive humanity there than that of John Ford. And of course, John Huston, too, of course. I mean, Treasure of the Sierra Madre. John Ford made some great Westerns. It's undeniable. Stagecoach is great. It's not. I don't think it's as great as its reputation. The Searchers, Mark, you and I have spent more than enough time demythosing,
right?
Demythologist. Just I don't want to even waste time discussing how trite I think that movie is.
Thank you.
But
and
I
ugly,
do think
in tone and in visual style at points.
Thank you. But I do think My Darling Clementine is like the best film that John Ford ever made. It's beautiful, it's haunting, it's gorgeous, it's emotionally affecting, and it's one of his lesser films too. It's a film that isn't quite often as referred. When you think of the John Ford Western, My Darling Clementine is not the first movie that they reference, but I would say that it's his masterwork. It's the film of his that I think transcends his other movies. It's just gorgeous, and yeah, I love it. I absolutely love that film. Mark.
Gabe, my man. You are living your life to the fullest degree. What can I say, my man? Now we're talking. How are you doing?
I can say that I think I got to reassess what I said about David Lynch last week.
Hey, you know what? There's a new biography, man. I gotta check out on David Lynch.
I'm gonna have to check that out because I gotta say that. I kind of dissed him last week, and I just think that's unfair because the guy has just made some really brilliant and crazy and bafflingly memorable films. I don't necessarily like a lot of his movies. I don't necessarily think that they're nearly as important or as profound as most people do. But when I thought about it after the show was over last week, and I'm like, Twin Peaks, Season 1, I will never forget most of the images that I saw in that entire it's more profound than most TV than shows that have 10 seasons. Just for the absurdity and just how much I enjoyed it. Just what am I watching? And to think about that being on the air in 1990, that just tickles me. And like I mentioned on the show last week that I like his minor or his less Lynchian movies than his like loudly described, like Eraserhead, like movies like Eraserhead and Blue Velvet and Mulholland Drive. Those are great movies. Mulholland Drive is my favorite of those three, but they just don't work for me on the way that they work for like a lot of film people and a lot of film scholars. I think that they're brilliant works of art, and I think the fact that they come from the depths of his subconscious through transcendental meditation, they're very personal works of art, and they're powerful. They're undeniably great and among the masterworks of cinema. I just don't need to revisit them myself, but I don't think it's any less credit to anyone who thinks that those are among their favorite films, because they are. They're exceptional works of cinema. But the films of David Lynch that really have stuck with me are The Straight Story, Wild at Heart, and Dune. I don't know why. Those are the ones I like the most. Those are the ones I enjoy. And those are the ones that I don't have a problem rewatching. I got to say, The Straight Story is my favorite David Lynch film because
that's an elegant film. The Straight Story is an elegant film. I stand by my angle on Mr. Lynch. He's definitely of interest, but I'm not going to fall for it all, hook, line, and sinker. Like I already said that. I already said what I said, but I am interested in reading about him and reading about his thoughts and his outlook on things for sure, and his influences. So I very much look forward to reading that.
Absolutely. Also, I want to reiterate, film podcasts, everyone. I love anyone that listens to this film podcast or this show live on FM and 104.1 in River West in Milwaukee. The Film Comment Podcast, I just can't recommend that enough. I'm a latecomer to it, and it's just like it's just everything you can want in a podcast about film. I just can't recommend it enough. It's super cool. Please, listening to an episode the other day about Toby Hooper, it's just you're listening to some of the most learned academic scholars of of any generation that have this sort of casual nonchalance that's just so inviting. It's not cozy, but it's just very free, and it's very straightforward, and it's very funny, and it speaks the language of film people in film people language without being too winky or being too condescending or too narcissistic. It's just super cool. The Toby Hooper episode, the formative directors episodes, where there's 2 of them. There's an episode about VHS memories. There's just episodes on queer cinema. There's just every episode is just like a treasure chest of joy. And the Director's Cut podcast, which is recorded live at the Directors Guild Theater in New York, where it takes place directly after a screening of a Directors Guild member's new film being screened there, where they're interviewed by another director on stage in front of an audience of their peers, and they mostly, just the 2 of them, just discuss the film or the director and questions work, and then they do a Q&A with the audience. And the episode the other day with Paul Schrader discussing First Reform, which is basically a reiteration and an extension of his interview that he did on Fresh Air with Terry Gross. You're just in heaven.
Yes, and I oh man, we got to cut this, man. But I would say this: I'm glad you brought that up. I've always admired, always looked toward Paul Schrader. So I'm glad you brought that up. Gabe, I want to say thanks for coming on the show, my man.
Mark, you know it. I love it.
Well, you are the show. I'm thanking the dude who. Well, anyway, thanks, B.
Mark,
let's put it to you that way.
Mark, it's just a joy and a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to be able to do this with you every week.
Hey, Gabe, have a really, and likewise, my man, have a very, very, very good night.
Mark, take care. Listeners, thank you all. We'll see you again next Monday.
See you, Gabe. Yeah, time goes by really fast, and I'm glad... First of all, bless your heart, Gabe, and I'm glad he brought up Paul Schrader. I've always dug Paul Schrader. He wrote Taxi Driver, directed Blue Collar and Hardcore and Light Sleeper and The Canyons and now First Reform, among many other. But he's a film scholar. He's a very young film scholar. He came out with that book in his 20s on Bresson, Ozu, and Dreyer, and I really dig Ozu. Really dig Dreyer. Never got into Bresson. Saw many of his works. Revisited Pickpocket to get onto it, but it's not happened yet. And Schrader's description of Bresson's ecstatic moment, I don't dig. I think that's just a tacky denouement. That's what it is from this perspective. But again, everyone's different, man. So I got to look at the clock here. Let's see. We got till we got less than a minute for sure. So I want to thank everybody for listening in. It is good to live life fully. But those are just empty words. You have to make the neural connections. You got to work on it each and every day. And it's like practice, practice, practice. Because all this garbage comes into your mind and your brain doesn't know what to do. So always say no to everyone else unless it's out of respect and honor. Say yes to yourself, yes to your dreams. It's going to happen. Believe you me, you can. Yeah, it's on you. Do what you want, man. It's a free country, and but just be well. We will be on at the same time next week on WXRWLP 104.1 FM Milwaukee. To hear past episodes, visit riverwestradio.com/shows and click Cinema Fireside.